So hello everyone from the authoritarian monarchy of the United Kingdom. Now, I made a video last week about the coronation of King Charles, our new sovereign, appointed by God, one of the richest men in the UK, had an all expenses paid coronation and even some concert of Katy Perry paid for by the taxpayer. And I've wanted to make this video for a while, and I guess because I'm covering UK politics a bit recently, I'm going to do this video today. So it's about the worst subreddit on the whole of Reddit. What could that be? When we have something like sink pissers, surely there's nothing worse than that. Oh, but there is. It is the United Kingdom subreddit. Now, some of you who use Reddit and maybe even subscribe to United Kingdom might be thinking, well, how is this the worst one? But we're going to get into it because I think the United Kingdom subreddit is maybe like Britain in a microcosm. Now, a lot of British people like to think they're very liberal, they're very tolerant, they're not racist at all, but only start posting articles from the Daily Mail about Albanians, about travellers, about reparations for black people, and the whole sub basically becomes this guy. Now, I've been subscribed to United Kingdom for a long time. I've been banned for years, I think because I posted one of my own videos in the subreddit without realising. You're allowed to do that. So I haven't been able to comment or participate in a lot of these riveting discussions. But what I thought would be fun today is to go through different articles that get posted there and look at the comments. And I guess it's going to be divided by themes. Because like I said, on the surface, it seems like a fairly liberal and tolerant subreddit. But when certain issues come up, like, I don't know, how Irish people feel about English colonisation, the treatment of travellers, Albanian immigrants, and then, yeah, like I said, I think the subreddit goes mask off. So all of that coming up for today. Please like the video. And in the comments, let me know, what do you think the worst subreddit is? Also, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, but also on Instagram. Instagram is just a better place to interact with me, and it's where I have posted about my travels around Asia, which are all archived on the highlight reels. If you care about any of that stuff, also consider becoming a patron. I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, and the benefits right now are getting access to the Discord server, getting access to my Nintendo Switch friend code. There's also some exclusive content on there from my travels, with more coming, and the podcast is launching at the weekend, and half of that will be exclusive to the Patreon page. So again, if you care about any of that or just want to support me, check out the Patreon. And also on Reddit, check out my subreddit and check out my second channel. The second channel is where the public episodes of the podcast will be going. So if you care about any of that stuff, all in the description for you. Just a quick overview for people who don't even really know what Reddit is. A subreddit is a community which is self-modded by a team of moderators who pretty much aren't appointed on merit or whatever. It's because they got there first, in many cases in Reddit. And the United Kingdom is just one of many for various different countries. You can pretty much find any country you want in there. I browsed the Cambodian one, Vietnam, Thailand. There are plenty of ones you can look at. Ireland as well, of course. I might make a whole video on Ireland because that's a mess as well. But the United Kingdom one, on the surface, it is fairly liberal and tolerant because it feels like, on Reddit at least, especially British people who use Reddit, they're more young and they're more liberal. I don't want to demonize everyone who uses it. So what I found when we're talking about King Charles's coronation, most of them didn't care, or most of them were against the heavy-handed response to the protest where they're just arresting people for carrying stuff that was anti-monarchy. I mean, that seems like the bare minimum, but you'd be surprised at how many British people would support stuff like that. And generally, they don't hate Jeremy Corbyn, but they're quite liberal in that they're I like Jeremy Corbyn, but his policies were never going to work. And they do generally back Keir Starmer, but at least recently, our lovely leader of the Socialist Labour Party, Keir Starmer, who's insanely right-wing, recently they are criticising him more. So I can't argue with that. They're criticising Charles, they're criticising Keir Starmer, and they absolutely hate the Tories as well. All of that sentiment you will find very, very common in the UK subreddit. And like I said, on the surface, it might seem like a pretty left-leaning place, a pretty good place. But you only have to bring up a handful of issues to see the mask slip and the real British values coming out. Now, before we get into this, what I think this is liberal British patriotism. And it's something that I used to feel a bit more when I was younger, before I started identifying more of my Irish Republican heritage. They think Britain is a pretty good place in terms of social values, a pretty good place to live, And although there are loads of problems, primarily caused by the Tories, a lot of things to do with British history we should be proud of, and we shouldn't be ashamed of things like the slave trade and stuff like that, because British people ended slavery. So amazing. They might have pioneered the most effective way to maximise profits off the slave trade, including the British royal family, which still has that wealth. But yeah, they ended it as well. So aren't they great? So you see that sentiment in it, and it's a lot of British exceptionalism. And that's why they get so mad when you start bringing up Irish people. And on that note, this was today, and I posted this on Twitter as well, because I was laughing so much at the cope here, right? So Joe Biden obviously was in Northern Ireland recently, and Joe Biden comes from like an Irish Catholic background, and he's also like helped with the Good Friday Agreement because he was one of the top Democrats in the Bill Clinton era in the Senate. So he was heavily involved, Bill Clinton was heavily involved, and a lot of, Irish Americans were heavily involved because they wanted peace in Northern Ireland if it wouldn't become part of the Republic of Ireland. So today, Joe Biden says he was in Northern Ireland to make sure the Brits didn't screw around. This has been a common position with the Democrats since Biden have got in. They basically said to the UK, don't mess with Northern Ireland, don't mess with the Good Friday Agreement, which brought peace to Northern Ireland and guaranteed an open border between the Republic and the North, because we work so hard for that, and we don't want to see you undermine that to potentially create a lot of tension in Northern Ireland, which could kick off into maybe violence, right? So out of everything to do with the Democrats that I hate, Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden saying that and saying, won't do a proper trade deal with the UK if you start messing with Northern Ireland, I got no problem with, and I'm an Irish person who supports, obviously Irish unity, but I think even most people would support that position by the Americans, right? Stop the Tories from doing really bad stuff in Northern Ireland, which could create actual violence. But people on the UK subreddit, they don't see it like this. The moment you start mentioning Irish people, they go off on one. They don't even argue at what Joe Biden is saying. They just start criticising because they view him as a plastic paddy. So look at some of the top voted comments. This dude is a cartoon character. He likes to forget that he has British ancestry too, just like picking the Irish side, like the majority of Americans, because they have to have some struggle, can't be claiming the bad guys, right? So what even is this comment? Can't you just actually talk about the merit of what Joe Biden is saying? He's about as Irish as an Irish-themed pub in Islington, running around on St. Patrick's Day in an orange wig, wearing a green jacket, drunk and carrying a pig under your arm, does not make you Irish. I do love the gatekeeping of what makes you Irish by English people. So I agree with this comment, this seems pretty reasonable. His fondness for Ireland and his disdain for the British can be influenced by separate factors. Seems like he was brought up to be proud of his Irish heritage, but his criticisms of the UK are influenced by politics. It's clear that his British ancestry isn't enough for him to gloss over UK politics. Someone replies, sure or not. Wouldn't be the first Irish American to dislike the UK purely off the back of their faux ancestry? What, so Joe Biden actually isn't Irish now? Plus the general lack of professionalism, like the above remark and the previous comparison to Israel and Palestine, makes me think it's slightly more than merely a political dispute. This guy is so strange. He acts like he has lived in Cork for 70 years or something. All Irish Americans do though. They act more Irish than actual Irish people. Had to scroll down to find some sanity. What are you guys even mad about? He's right. He should be putting pressure on us not to screw around in Ireland. I'm pretty sure Ireland is more eager to claim him as an Irishman than some guy who was born in Clapham with an Irish dad and a London accent. It seems like they absolutely loved him. Someone else replying, it's a very undiplomatic way to talk about your closest ally, whom you supposedly have a special relationship with. It comes across as patronising and insulting, and in my opinion, there is a certain anti-British undertone in it. Again, more cope about the way Joe Biden spoke about this. It's not the kind of wording I would expect from the leader of our biggest ally. Oh, so sad. Making sure the Brits don't screw around is the kind of comment that I'm sure will sound excellent to his base. It's not the kind of offhand comment a world leader should make, especially when it's about a fairly recent war zone and your country was a signatory to the peace deal. Special relationship in action. Imagining a sitting British PM referring to Americans as the Yanks. He won't play plastic if they need us for one of their special operations though. This should result in a diplomatic slap on the knuckles, but it won't. The sooner we stop kowtowing to America, the better. So one more comment on this. I think that such language from a sitting US president is highly undiplomatic and borderline Trumpian. I would be embarrassed if Sunak spoke like this so freely about our allies, regardless of the circumstances. Even Boris restrained himself more than Biden. Also, there's no better way to unite the British public against something than having an American president lecture and interfere. If only we had half the backbone the French do when it's telling them to F off when they overstep the mark. So British centrists and liberals and conservatives in a nutshell don't address anything Joe Biden is saying, but because he's criticised Britain, he's the devil. You got to go after his ancestry, say he's a fake Irish person, he's a plastic paddy, criticise him, basically call him Donald Trump because he didn't want the Brits screwing around in Ireland. Anti-Irish sentiment in the UK has largely died down, but you only have to start saying something pro-Irish and anti-English for them to all kick off saying stuff like this. Like, seriously, we're going to look at another article where these people just can't understand why Irish people don't like England. They think it's like all in the past. There's only a minority of them, and Joe Biden is pandering to some like imagined group of people who all love Irish republicanism. But also, I find it funny as well. Like, do they not understand that American people generally have supported like Irish unity and Irish independence? Like, De Valera, the first president of Ireland, was literally born in the United States. Like, it's been pretty central to like both political parties when Irish have been allowed in like elite American society. Like, it really isn't anything new, but you see how precious they are. Again, no one addressing the substance, no one addressing the policy I told you of what like Nancy Pelosi and Biden have said to the British government about Northern Ireland. They helped agree the peace deal back in the 90s. It's all about fake Irish Joe Biden. And I hate Joe Biden, right? But this is the one area I think he's pretty funny on because most of the time he's right. But on that anti-Irish sentiment, don't worry. The UK subreddit is absolutely overflowing with it. Now, this one you would think they wouldn't be so mad about. So Celtic fans sing, "You can shove your coronation up your ass." So basically, if you guys don't know, Glasgow Celtic is a football team that plays in the Scottish League. It has a four-leaf clover as its badge. A lot of its supporters are Catholics, but also Irish Catholics primarily, and they've had a long-running feud with Glasgow Rangers. Glasgow Rangers represent like Protestantism, unionism, loyalism to the British Crown, and it's kind of like symptomatic of the conflict in Northern Ireland between the two sides, right? So most people who support Celtic are Republicans, and if they have Irish ancestry, Irish Republicans as well. The people giving the most sectarian abuse to the other is Rangers saying stuff about Republicans, saying they're going to drown themselves in Fenian blood, supporting like really racist groups, including the royal family. One thing in British society which I find very fascinating is that you can't say anything positive or even explain the situations where people would support the Irish Republican Army. Now, like I've told you multiple times, probably too much, I have like Irish Republican heritage. My ancestor was the guy who planned the Easter Rising. Sean McDermott, who was executed for doing this, and it started like the War of Independence against the British, which the Irish eventually won, apart from taking back Northern Ireland, right? So when I think of the Irish Republican Army, I'm like, oh, what, the guys who freed Ireland from the British? But these guys also like to link it into the Troubles. But again, that's just an extension of the War for Independence. Of course, that doesn't mean you condone everything that happened. But if you know anything about history, it's all on the colonizer to leave the colonized land, right? If you create a system in a country which is systematically violent towards a certain group of people, usually the native people there, and they fight back against you, and then you fight back with overwhelming force and kill way more of them, then it's on the colonizer to leave because what you're doing is wrong and immoral. So as much as the IRA actually created suffering and misery, if the British government just left Ireland, originally after the First War of Independence, none of these problems would still exist today. So it's all on them, right? The OG IRA, which my family were in, are like seen as heroes in places in Ireland, despite doing pretty terrible things as well. The same as like future generations of the same Republican Army. But in the comments here it says, "Can't stand football, but suddenly I'm a die-hard Celtic fan." They also sing Up the Ravo, so like inherently they're bad then for singing this. Irish Republicans singing about the Irish Republican Army. I mean, anyone who actually knew the history of English in Ireland and the history of the IRA probably would not have much of an issue with this, but this gets downvoted, this comment. So someone replying to him, "It's not an English bad IRA heroes cartoon, pal. It's not G.I. Joe. There are some horrible bastards on both sides, and as always, it's the innocent who suffered." And is this like some Last of Us 2 framing of a conflict where everything just gets lost in the terrible violence, but there's like no cause to it? The cause of the terrible violence was like 800 plus years of British colonialism. They could have left at any time. They could have stopped, I don't know, doing terrible things to Irish people. You know, they could have not sold all the food in Ireland, which created a famine, which reduced the Irish population so much, it still hasn't recovered 170 years later. I mean, yes, targeting civilians is bad. For a lot of these groups, it's the only way to fight back against one of the most advanced militaries in the world who are occupying your land. Like I said, if you don't want these terrible things done, it's on the colonizer to leave. That should make sense to absolutely everyone, but somehow it doesn't. Like, when you do settle a colonialism and create a system which discriminates against the native group there, I guess you just have claim to the land for all of history. And if anyone does more than peaceful protest, then they're actually just as bad. Like, this is your brain on British liberalism, but liberalism as a whole. Their worshipping of the IRA was something to see too. Quite incredible. Other people saying, at least these are downvoted, these ones. Surprised at all the people celebrating sectarianism. Some fans that sing about the IRA week in, week out, nothing but sectarian bigots. This is embarrassing sectarian nonsense. And I'd say the same thing if Rangers fans responded in kinds. They're singing about the coronation. Apparently saying you can shove your coronation up your arse is sectarianism. Like, discriminating against these people based on their religion, because these people who are also British subjects don't agree with the royal family or the monarchy, so that's like discrimination against Rangers fans and Protestants everywhere. But don't worry, we're going to get back to support for the monarchy, because like I said, they don't support Charles, but they do support the Queen. And the reaction to the Queen's death in this subreddit was absolutely hilarious and maddening at the same time, because no one was saying anything bad about her, just all talking about how they weren't monarchists, but they loved her. But here's a good article and post to read before we get into like the blatant racism and xenophobia in this subreddit as well. So, survey. UK is one of the least racist countries in the world. A new report shows widespread acceptance of immigrants and minorities. So I had to scroll down to find this comment, which outlined where this study was coming from. So the source is Unheard. Founded by conservative Brexiteer Tim Montgomery, former advisor to the racist Boris Johnson's report on a flimsy study which proclaims the UK, whose government wants to send asylum claimants to Rwanda, is not racist. So if that headline sounded a bit too good to be true, it probably is. So I'm not going to pretend societally the UK is like one of the most racist places in the world. But I will say racism is often more visible in places with more diverse populations, because yeah, you have all the acceptance. I spoke before growing up in my like London bubble, growing up in a diverse school and community and stuff like that. I never really saw like terrible, crazy racism, and my friends never really told me about like the worst kinds of racism you hear about. But racism is very prevalent in the UK. But I think people need to understand is that racism in this country often gets mixed in with xenophobia. Like, British people don't just hate people who aren't white. They hate people who aren't English. Like, they're extremely xenophobic to Eastern Europeans, Romanians, they're extremely xenophobic to Arab people. Like, British xenophobia often gets mixed in with the actual racism. But anyway, let's read at some of the comments on this article proclaiming Britain is the least racist place ever. So people that constantly talk about how racist this country is have clearly never been to another country. We're not perfect. The biggest barrier in this country for everyone is class. So you would need to have zero experience or understanding of pretty much every other country on earth to think the UK is particularly racist. This isn't to say we don't still have issues in this area. Every country does, but we're still doing far better than almost everywhere else. You'd have to be very unworldly to think Britain and British people are racist, or someone who subscribes to far-left ideas like critical race theory. What are the bets that this guy actually is racist himself if he's talking about, I don't know, people who believe in critical race theory, that like insane conspiracy from America? So this subreddit declared it. UK is not racist. It's actually one of the least racist countries in the entire world. Let's see if this theory holds up. Let's go through some articles now, and let's see how not racist the UK is. So Rishi Sunak rejects calls to apologise and pay reparations. 1,000 upvotes, and basically all the comments agreeing. People happily go around driving Mercedes. You know, companies that did quite a lot of bad less than 100 years ago, but want reparations for something that happened a few hundred years ago. The cognitive dissonance is maddening. When are they going to thank us for ending the slave trade. Why isn't this the top comment? 1807 and 1833 should be national celebrations. No one wants to celebrate the fact that our ancestors finally saw the error of their ways and did something about it. We will probably be accused of being racist if we did. The woke make bank from victim narrative. There's a lot of people pushing a victim narrative these days. Can't remember the last time I read a UK sub where most people seem to agree with each other. Reparations are absurd. It's all a cash grab. Paying reparations would be a tactic and mission that the current British people are legally responsible for the moral crimes of our ancestors. I have no problems with paying reparations to actual victims, but not to their ancestors. I also find it funny that these reparation activists never come at the African countries who are responsible for catching and selling slaves. I don't see them going up to Portugal either, despite the fact that Portugal were responsible for the most slaves transported during the Atlantic slave trade. America's racial ideological rot is spreading here fast. Like a cancer, it's spreading everywhere. I'm proud of the fact that Britain was instrumental in ending slavery worldwide and don't feel like we have anything to apologise for. So where do we even begin with this? So apparently, the least racist place in the world, the UK, has all people saying, yeah, reparations are stupid, don't pay them. And they're so unimaginative, they just can't even think of how these reparations will be paid. I've got one for you, right? So the royal family were heavily involved in the slave trade. It's estimated that Charles's net worth, all the wealthy overseas, is worth $44 billion. And most of that is inherited wealth that hasn't been properly taxed by the UK government, right? So I have an idea. Why don't we do reparations by taking the wealth of the royal family, since they earned a lot of their wealth on the slave trade? They became insanely wealthy off the slave trade. So why don't we take some of that and maybe we could give it to, I don't know, Jamaica, you know, colonies which are inhabited by people who are descended from slaves that the British government put there and sold there, right? How is that so radical and woke? Why can't we do that? Why can't we pay reparations to these countries like that? And if people can trace their lineage back to slavery in the UK as well, which is probably like a smaller minority, then why can't that fund be used to pay them? I guess because the UK wasn't like a plantation slave state like America and Jamaica and all these places. I guess our understanding is we just think give all black people money or something, despite the fact a lot of people in the UK are from African countries and they've come here directly from Africa and stuff. But that isn't my understanding of what reparations would be. Reparations would be for Commonwealth countries. There are still countries today with people who are descended from slaves where the king and the former queen is the head of state, right? So why can't we do that? But now let's touch on the notion that the citizens of the least racist country on earth, the UK apparently, are also saying we should celebrate that Britain ended slavery and it should be held up as an example as a country who ended slavery. Why doesn't anyone talk about that? The British ended slavery. Isn't that amazing? They also did slavery for hundreds of years and they made loads of money off selling people for profit and creating this hierarchy of racism which still affects people today. And I'm supposed to celebrate it. I'm supposed to celebrate them as the most virtuous people who ever existed because they stopped doing that? Just because they weren't the first people to do it, because the Portuguese were the first people to do it, doesn't mean they should get credit because they ended it before these groups as well. They got in on it. The royal family enriched themselves off it, and that generational wealth still exists today. So if you're so not racist, how can you not understand that saying we should celebrate the British as moral people for ending slavery when they participated in it, killed millions of African people, sold millions into slavery, all while making money for the elite in this country? You have to be racist to have that line of logic because it's absolutely insane. Imagine any other example of that happening. Like imagine saying like, oh yeah, the British should be given credit for, I don't know, letting colonies have independence because look, I don't know, Belgium or another country kept them longer. So the British doing it was good. The British getting rid of their colonies in some places was good. But like I said, they did it. They did it in the first place. Stopping yourself being evil deserves no credit, deserves no celebrations, because they created a system of racism which still affects people's economic situations. Yes, you should take wealth away from the royal family who massively benefited off this slave trade system and give it to families who are the victims of that system. I mean, that might be too hard to understand for people who live in the least racist country that's ever existed. But I don't know, personally, I think it's a good idea. And also, I don't think the British should get any credit for stopping their participation in one of the worst modern evils. And it's not like they did it because they're moral, because then they went on to kill millions of people in India between the period they ended slavery and the period India got independence. And of course, hundreds of thousands more just in general colonialism round the world. Don't pretend to me the British were like unique in valuing human life because they opted out of the slave trade before some other countries. So people from the least racist country and least racist subreddit on earth, here's another article. Travellers accused of wreaking havoc in West London hospital car park. And of course, goes without saying, most people in the UK hate travellers. But I thought this was funny. There is so many deleted comments on this because they probably know on this subreddit the outright like hatred of traveller communities is like absolutely insane and normalized. Like if you go through the comments, you can see, you know, all the deleted comments quite telling, 200 upvotes, and then someone replying, "It's refreshing to see for once. Usually travellers are the ethnic group it's completely acceptable to hate on Reddit. Provides great recruitment material for getting people into more general purpose hate." 139 downvotes. Again, least racist place on earth. So a perfectly fair comment here. Again, another 133 downvotes. This behaviour is unacceptable, but this thread proves that hating on travellers is still the socially acceptable prejudice. If you wouldn't say all insert ethnicity here are scum and criminals and should live exactly like me, then why say it here? And deny it all you want, you cannot change the fact that most travellers in this country are of Romani descent, which is an ethnic minority. So, like I said, it's pretty telling that so many of the comments that are upvoted in that post are deleted, and people saying that, yeah, the actions of these people are bad, but I'm not going to use that as justification to discriminate against the whole group. They're the people getting massively downvoted. Again, you just read the comments about reparations, you just read the comments here, and the comments actually saying pretty sane things being downvoted. Least racist country on earth, apparently, and least racist subreddit by extension. So don't worry, we're going to get a nice dose of xenophobia. Like, this is absolutely insane. Like, I can't even believe some of the comments here, right? So something the Tories have been fear-mongering about recently is Albanian immigrants. I went to school with people from Albania. There's Albanian immigrants in, like, our Catholic school community and stuff. So I didn't even realise this was, like, a big culture war thing until later. So a Daily Mail article posted, 1,155 upvotes. "We have far too many criminals of our own. We don't need to bring them in from Albania. Judge rebukes migrant who turned to crime after arriving to Britain illegally by boat, as Albanians become the biggest contingent of foreign prisoners in UK jails. People willing to come here illegally tend to be criminals. I thought they were our future doctors and engineers." Then you get comments like this upvoted, "Albania is a total mafia state. And almost everyone is savvy in criminality. The Ponzi scheme which bankrupted practically the entire population a few years back didn't help. Beware Albanians." I don't know if this guy's trying to say beware of Albanians at the end, but it's pretty insane, and of course insanely xenophobic, to say everyone from Albania is savvy in being a criminal. Millions and millions of people are like inherently just predisposed to being criminals, right? This is the type of stuff you see on the UK subreddit whenever Albania gets brought up, or travellers as well. "Many Albanians are extremely violent and have completely taken over the drug scene. I know several bouncers that say Albanians are always causing trouble in town." Like, this is just like racism 101. It's like, I have anecdotal experience or I've heard gossip, therefore most Albanians are insanely violent criminals. Like, all of them, basically. It's like me based on my own experience. Like, I used to have a thing with an Albanian girl. Like, I was friends with some Albanians in school and stuff. It's like me saying, you know, every single Albanian is, like, absolutely the nicest person ever. And you can't say anything bad against anyone from Albania because, based on my personal experience, they're all really nice. People are just people. I don't think coming from a certain country inherently makes you a violent criminal. Like, this is insane xenophobia. Again, least racist country. "We're seen as a soft touch, which is why they flock here. Time to send these clowns back to their safe European nation the minute they land here. We are literally importing a criminal class at the taxpayer's expense. Absolutely insane. Retail security guard here. A good chunk of shoplifters I caught were foreigners. Anyone know where most Albanians live in the UK so I can avoid those areas?" So just like absolutely insane xenophobia there. Insane xenophobia. Basically saying that because there is Albanian criminal gang activity in the UK, that means every single Albanian person is a criminal. And Albania is a mafia state, So they all come here being really savvy and being a criminal. These people would get mad if you called them xenophobic or racist and stuff like that. They would actually get super offended while saying stuff like this. Most of the people I catch shoplifting are foreigners. Just a little statement I'm making, not about my personal beliefs, about all foreigners being criminals and stuff. We also have a lot of simping for the royal family. So I read some of these in my video about the Queen dying because, you know, the whole thing was absolutely just so funny. I'm still laughing about it. But this is like one of the most top voted posts in all time on the UK subreddit. And I thought we'd go through some of the comments because they're funny. I also think they're pretty telling about the UK's mentality towards being, I don't know, completely cucked by the royal family and establishment. Queen Elizabeth II has died, age 96. So the pinned mod comment is, anyone that glorifies, celebrates, or calls for violence or death on anyone will be instantly banned. So here's some comments for you. I'm sad about this, even though I'm no royalist. Only monarch we've ever known. Same, no royalist at all. But it's like a big part of British identity has passed away. Rest in peace. Not a fan of the Queen either, but the British people have had it hard enough in these difficult times. She was a beacon of stability for what it's worth, and now that's fallen too. How, like, what is this? Same, not a royalist, but had huge respect for her work ethic. I mean, I don't respect the Queen's work ethic, getting millions of pounds from the government for just meeting foreign leaders for expensive dinners and stuff. Like, these people are crazy. Like, stability, a beacon of like hope and stability, appreciate the work ethic. If you were worth $44 billion, I'd hope you put in the minimum work the Queen does while she went around the world in her expensive private yacht and owned like 5% of land in the UK. I'm very much anti-royalist. I'm against a monarchy as an institution. I feel sad. Why do you feel sad then? That's the thing that pisses me off about supposed anti-monarchist summers in the UK. Like, why are you sad? What are you anti-monarchist for then? She ruled over the British Empire. She enriched herself from the British Empire. Loads of terrible things were done in her name, and she didn't say anything about it or abdicate the throne. Like, if you were the Queen and seeing all these like terrible massacres done in colonies in your name for the British Empire, for the Queen, you'd think you wouldn't stand for it. You'd either say something, which the monarchy aren't really meant to, or you'd abdicate because that would eat away at you, not sit in your massive castle was hoarding loads of wealth and having loads of stolen wealth from the slave trade or just colonialism in general. Like, call yourself an anti-monarchist. You're not an anti-monarchist if you feel sad about this person dying, because at the very least, it might signal the beginning of the end for the monarchy. The exact same. Seeing the news has given me a sad feeling. I thought I wouldn't get about it. I'm surprised by how sad it's made me feel, actually. By no means a royalist, but such a weird emotion knowing we've lost our Queen. Not a royalist, but saying she's our Queen, it's not my Queen. But I like what I've read you from this subreddit to highlight problems with the British mentality, right? So British people think they're great. British people think they're exceptional in the world. Very tolerant, not racist at all. But just don't mention stuff to do with the royal family. Don't say bad things about the Queen. Don't say why Irish people might hate the UK. Feel free to be really xenophobic and also talk about how great the British Empire was for ending slavery. So it gives you a good insight into like the liberal centrist UK mind. So this is how ignorant British people are, and in this ignorance, even people with more good intentions, like they might not like the Conservative government, they might realise the UK is a mess, they might be anti-Brexit, they still have these really reactionary, even nationalist tendencies, which make them really xenophobic, actually do make them pretty racist while pretending they are all not racist. And of course, they can't understand why Irish people generally might celebrate the people who liberated them from British control. So that is why it's the worst subreddit in my opinion, because you can go browse it now and I'm sure you'll see a lot of things you agree with. You'll see a lot of people talking about how much they hate Conservatives, how much, you know, they're struggling with the cost of living, and it's all the government's fault. And, you know, all this other stuff about landlords as well they hate. But when it comes to certain things like Irish people, Albanian people, travellers, and the brutal history of the British Empire, then they start turning into full-on right-wing reactionaries. So anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.